Someone wrote in and said, how do I avoid building resentments towards a person who's disappointed me? The disappointments sometimes feel like they come all at once, and I'm left feeling resentful for past disappointments and the current disappointment. And how do I stop having expectations of others? This is a great question. Reid Mahalko from readaboutsex.com.
Cathy Vartuli from theintimacydojo.com.
And how would you handle this, Reid?
Well, it's probably, my go-to is the 5 love languages.
The 5 languages of apology.
The sequel.
Oh, sorry.
5 love languages sequel, the 5 languages of apology, which I think might have been renamed to When Sorry Isn't Enough.
And Jennifer, I can always forget her last name. Is a co-author.
Yeah. I would start there, because if you're still disappointed in things, then probably what has happened is that you can't forgive the person. And if restitution is your main language for forgiveness, it will be really hard for that person, if the opportunity cannot be recreated, for them to restore the situation and complete it for you to forgive them. So whenever you think of that, you will always be disappointed that that didn't happen.
Sore spot that hasn't healed.
Yeah. And then, maybe take some workshops and some therapy, because sometimes that will help if, that person can't fix any of that stuff. And then if you have a lot of resentment coming up, that usually to me means you're saying yes to things you shouldn't, which could mean you're saying yes to inviting this person to things without recalibrating that they can't fulfill on stuff. So and the way I frame it that way is so that you can take responsibility for your setting up situations or saying yes to situations that will continue to disappoint you. And then just disappointment layered on top of itself feels like it could be resentment. Yeah. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I think the nature of being human and alive is that there's sometimes we have resentments. Sometimes people let us down. Like that's, life seems to be like that. But some of us have more sore spots from early childhood or recent experiences. And I think it's really important to distinguish between being disappointed at that particular person versus, are these disappointments for my mom or dad? And in that case, that's a really good time to get some therapy. Work through those if you can, so that, we're going to face disappointments. There's going to be times when it's painful, but they're not landing and making all the other ouchy places hurt. Like sometimes it just feels like, oh my God, they didn't show up for the movies. It feels like the whole world's falling apart. When it's really like, okay, they didn't show up to the movies. I can actually go myself or call another friend. Yeah. It's not huge, but it feels, and I'm not taking away from anyone's experience, like it can feel huge in the moment. So if you can acknowledge, it may not always, try to distinguish what is about this person and what is about other people.
Your life.
Yeah, life in general.
When people make me, no one makes me do anything, but when I'm late for events because of other circumstances, other people, it kicks up all of my family stuff where my mom was chronically late for things and we would have to wait and always arrive late. So that's spot on, because it's like I'm getting and it's not because we're going to miss the trailers for the movie. It's all my family stuff that's there.
Yeah, missing the trailers. Oh, that's disappointing, but it's not like...
No, do not miss the trailers. You cannot miss the trailers. Those are the best parts of the movies.
Often, yes.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
That's important stuff. You deserve to be resentful then, if they make you miss the trailers. I think we can agree on that.
Sure, we can agree on that. But I think this is a good example of maybe you're not speaking up, and this is something I've really struggled with, and I still, even though I talk about speaking up, there's times I'm like a week later, I'm like, oh, I didn't say anything. So if something's really important to you and you're not communicating that may not be the other person's. They might not think it's a big deal.
So, they might not even know.
Yeah. So if movie trailers are a big thing for you, say, hey, I would love to go to see this movie with you. It adds so much to my experience to be there with you. And I need to see the trailers. It's super important to me. I feel off the whole movie if I don't get that.
I think it's a good example because it's silly, but then some people are like, that is absolutely right. Trailers are sacred.
Yeah. Well, and I like you shared that if you're going to the movies with somebody, you don't like to get all the tickets. You'll tell them, if you're not there when the trailers are about to start, I'm going in. You can try to find me.
And I'm not going to hide your ticket underneath,
the plant.
Because there aren't plants usually out in front of things. I'm just like, you buy your own ticket, I'm going inside.
Yeah.
then it's happier. You get to come into the movie at whatever time
in
you
the
want
dark
to,
and like.
and I'll text you where I'm sitting, and we'll be good.
Yeah.
We'll be good.
So there may be ways to, if you talk with people and explain what's important to you and share that, you know, like, hey, I realized I felt really disappointed the other day when you didn't show up on time and I was late for the thing, and I would really like it if we can in the future, like, you know, one, I would love it if you apologize, but two, if we're going to do this again, let's make sure we front load so that it's not so hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can apologize too when it's appropriate for not knowing to communicate a want or a need that you had, because it's also weird and difficult for some people to arrive. Like, let's say they were busting their butt to get to the movies and they had to help an old lady across the street or something, right? Yeah. And then from across the street it was, can you help me up to my apartment and help me get the groceries upstairs? Whatever, right? Yeah. They might have been busting their hump just trying to be a good person and get to you on time. And maybe their battery was died, so they couldn't text you, because I know you're thinking, well, why didn't they text? So when they arrive, stressed out on their end, they arrive into all this resentment. Yeah. So again, like, we're humans. This is going to happen. Mm-hmm. But your turnaround time to be aware of what these things are, know yourself and your emotional IQ, so that you know how to navigate. You know, the way that I know waiting for movie trailers is not good for if you want to arrive into a loving, kind universe with Reid Mihalko in it. So like the more you know these things about yourself and can communicate, you're just being better as a person, because you know these things, and you're also role modeling that then your friends might be like, oh, you know what? I have this thing too about such and such, and they communicate to you so that you don't roll in on all this resentment and upset.
Yeah, because we have different expectations, and you asked, how do you stop having expectations? Expectations are unspoken agreements, and we all are brought up with those. But we have different ones. Different families have different expectations, different patterns. So if I expect you to always wait at the end to the table and ask to, you know, not acknowledge you're going to leave the table before the end of the meal, that was a big thing in my family.
Totally, I was just telling them.
Well, it's shocking to me, like when someone just stands up and leaves, and I'm like, is the meal over? What's happening? But that's an expectation I had. That's something that I was brought up with, and that was a very firm. You did not leave the table without, like, kids had to ask permission. Mm-hmm. So, you know,
I'm a kid.
No, adults had to acknowledge. Adults acknowledged they were leaving the table. They just didn't stand up and leave. But noticing where you have expectations versus agreements, like, hey, it's a really big deal for me. Can you just say something as before you get up so that I feel complete with the meal? And people can say yes or no, but then you can negotiate different agreements versus having things in your head like, how dare they do this? Mm-hmm. So hope this helps.
Thank your families for all this stuff.
Yes.
Because it's probably coming from them. Yeah. And sometimes people screw up or you miscommunicate.
Yeah. So
what do you think?
Leave some comments. Yeah. And you're never going to avoid all disappointment. It's about handling it so that it goes smoothly.